Okay, it's time for some secret sauce on control limits versus specification limits. Remember, secret sauce is not high tech, but when it comes to doing well on the exams, they're better than Butterfingers. Trust me. Okay, here we go. So let's say we have a beer production facility and we want to do a statistical process control chart. So let's kind of review how we do that. So periodically, let's say once every hour, we'll pull 4 bottles of beer off the filling line, and let's say we've done that about maybe 20 times. We've got 20 samples, and we compute the average fill level of each one of those samples of 4 bottles, and then we take the average of those averages, and let's say that turns out to be 11.9 ounces. Okay, so again, that's the average, that's the grand mean, the average of all those averages. So if we're making a statistical process control chart, that would be our center line. Okay, we'd also want to assess the amount of variation around that average, because every sample is not going to be 11.9. Some are going to be a little bit more, some are going to be a little bit less. And we can estimate the standard deviation of those samples using any number of a couple of different techniques. Let's not dwell on that right now. And once we have that standard deviation, we can draw in our control limits. So we can draw one control limit 3 standard deviations below the center line, and an upper control limit 3 standard deviations above the center line. Let's pretend these are the same distances. Let's say our standard deviation of our sample averages is 0.1. So if this is 3 standard deviations, that would be 0.3. So that would make this 11.6 ounces. Okay, and that would make this 12.2 ounces. Okay, and we could plot those original 20 samples on a control chart, or we could just use the control chart going forward. So let's say we've made our control chart and we take another sample, then say the next morning, and let's say that turns out to be 12 ounces. So we plot that there, and then we get another sample that's maybe 11.7 ounces, so that's about there. And then the next hour we take another sample, and our sample is 12.1 ounces, so that's there. And the next time we get a sample that's exactly 11.9 ounces, so that's there. And we can connect the points just to make this a little bit more interpretable. Say we get a couple more points. Okay, maybe something like that. Over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's just call it 8 just for symmetry. 8 hours of sampling. Okay. So that is our control chart with our control limits, our upper control limit, our lower control limit. Okay. And why do we use this control chart? Well, as you remember, we're interested in knowing whether or not the process is in control or out of control. If the process is in control, then the only variation that we have is just kind of chance, random variation from bottle to bottle, or from sample of bottles to sample of bottles. This looks random to me, right? If all the points were above the center line, that wouldn't be random, right? Or if we had 1 point above or below the 3 standard deviation control limits, that wouldn't be random, because that's just too far from what we thought was our process average, right? Or if we had a whole bunch of points just going up in a row, that doesn't look random, right? So there's all these different tests that we do to monitor our process to make sure there's not some special cause, maybe the pressure's building up in the fill thingamajig, right? And, that's what's causing these points to go up. We want to do something about that. All right, so again, that's a control chart. It's got control limits, and the control limits are one of the things that help us figure out whether or not the process is in control. Okay. Now at this point, have we said anything about how much beer has to be in the bottle? No, we haven't done that, right? Okay. Nominally a beer bottle it's 12 ounces, right? But here the center line's not 12, it's 11.9, because it doesn't have anything to do with the nominal fill level, what the brewery or the government says has to be in a 12-ounce bottle of beer. This is what the process is doing. And same thing with the upper control limits and the lower control limits. Those are all what the process is doing, okay? Now let's say that the company has a requirement, or let's say that the company has a specification of 12.1 ounces. All right, the center of the specification is 12.1 ounces, or the target of the specification is 12.1 ounces. Okay, and each and why would they maybe want 12.1 ounces instead of 12 ounces, which would be the nominal fill level? Well, they probably don't want bottles to be underfilled, right? So they say, okay, we're going to intentionally overfill every bottle. Yeah, the average bottle is probably going to be overfilled a little bit, but that's okay, because we're not going to get in trouble with our customers or get in trouble with our government. Okay, if the government regulates fill levels on beer bottles, I really don't know. Okay, so anyway, they've got the specification, and let's say they want every beer bottle, the ideal beer bottle is going to be 12.1 ounces. Every beer bottle has to be between 12.2, so that's the upper specification limit. This is the target, upper specification limit, and lower specification limit. So that's what the company has said needs to be in each beer bottle. Or maybe that's, well, we won't go there. So we've got, I'm sorry, let's call this 12 even. Okay, so the company's saying each beer bottle has to be 12.1 ounces plus or minus 0.1 ounce. Okay, so between 12 and 12.2 ounces. Okay, these are the specifications. Well, you know what I mean. It's not really spelled right, but close enough. Okay, so we've got two totally different things, right? The specification is something that the government or the company comes up with. The process is just the process, okay? Now, those two concepts are something that we should be, we should be interested in the relationship between those two concepts, right? Because we've got this specification, and the question is, can the process hit the specification? Can the process produce bottles that are consistently within the specification? And that's really what we are talking about when we talk about process capability. And process capability we can think of as the size of the specification over the variability in the process. It's just the ratio of those two different things, okay? So here the difference between the upper specification limit and the lower specification limit is 0.2 ounces, okay? And the variability in the process, remember, is expressed with standard deviations. And when we calculate the process capability index C sub p, by convention we use 3 standard deviations of the process. So we said the standard deviation was 0.1, so 3 standard deviations would be 0.3, right? So we can calculate process capability. Here it's less than 1. Your intuition is probably telling you, well, that's not very good, right? We've got a lot of variability in the process relative to the kind of width of this target that we're trying to hit. In other words, the target looks something like that, and the distribution of arrows, if we were shooting at the target, looks something like that. It's bigger than the target. That's not good. The main thing to understand, the main thing to understand for right now is that you've got the process, which is characterized by the control limits and X bar, and you've got the specifications, which are a function of what the company or the government or some other regulatory agency says they want. And then you've got process capability, which is kind of the union of the two things. Those are really the critical concepts to understand.